Hello everyone, this is Rick. Welcome to an episode on one of the most important cities of ancient Indian history, Kanauj. Kanauj has been one of the trading hubs and also a bone of contention between many major important Indian dynasties. So it is very important to discuss about Kanauj in detail. Before we go into details, here is a disclaimer for you. This video does not contain any music or graphics, so it will not be very much entertaining, but it will be very much informative. Hence, it will contain the information which actually matters. So, let's get into details. So, political scenario after Harsha. We know that Harshavardhan was the last empire builder of northern India, and after his death in 647 AD, the fragments came independent. So his empire had major dynasties united under his own dominion. However, when Harshavardhana died, all those important dynasties became autocratic and claimed independence. Harsha's death in 647 CE led to the fragmentation of northern Indian political unity. The throne of Kanauj was taken over by Arjuna. So Arjuna was a person who took over the throne of Kanauj. We don't know much about the ancestry of Arjuna, but he must have been from a very important family. And during his time, Wang Huanse was a person who came to India for a Chinese mission. Now, this mission was not political mission or military mission. It was a diplomatic mission. So, Wang Huanse was a Chinese person who, with his forces, came to India, and few of the Indian diplomats were supposed to go with Wang Huanse to the Chinese emperor. So there was to be a cultural transaction. However, this mission was not liked by Arjun because of some unknown reason. Hence, he resisted Wang Huanse's Chinese mission. So he at first attacked the Chinese mission of Wang Huanse, and this person Wang Huanse he went to Nepal, fled to Nepal. From there he gathered support. The Kamrupa ruler Bhaskar Burman also helped Wang Huanse, and they together attacked Kanauj to re-establish their control. So Kamrup ruler Bhaskar Burman, the ruler of Nepal, it is said that the ruler of Tibet at that point of time, he also supported Wang Huanse. All this together came and conquered back Kanauj. And during this conflict, Arjuna was defeated. He suffered massive losses. 3,000 of his soldiers were executed and 10,000 were drowned. So 10,000 were put under the river and 3,000 soldiers were killed when Wang Huanse reconquered Kanauj. The royal family of Kanauj was captured, and Wang Wense seized 12,000 prisoners along with royal treasures and horses. So Arjuna's family was captured, and as a compensation, he took all the royal treasures and horses. Wang Wense captured all the wealth of Kanauj along with 12,000 prisoners. The campaign marked the end of Arjuna's rule, with Kanauj becoming a major center of contention among emerging power. So after this Chinese ambassador conquered Kanauj, it became a habit for all the important Indian dynasties to struggle for Kanauj, and that led to different clashes. Yashovarman's rise to power. So, Yashovarman was another important person who ruled over Kanauj for some time, and he was one of the greatest rulers in ancient Indian history. So Yashovarman emerged as the ruler of Kanauj after the decline of Mokharis. His reign began around 648 CE. So after the death of Harsha, Yashovarman in 648 AD emerged as the power behind the throne of Kanauj, and he is supposed to have been a offshoot of the Moghari dynasty, or he may have been some relative of Harshavardhana also. His ancestry is still not clear. He launched significant military campaigns defeating the Gauda kings and extending his influence into eastern regions. So eastern region, mainly the area which is presently called Bengal, was ruled by Gauda kings. Shashanka was one of the famous Gauda king. So when he came to power, Yashovarman, he launched military campaigns against the Gauda kings, because if you remember right from the time of Harshavardhan, the Gauda kings were not in good terms with the Varman dynasty. So similar thing happened when Yashovarman came to power. He defeated the Gauda kings and extended his influence to the eastern regions. Yashovarman's rule is well documented in inscriptions and coins, confirming his reign until 688 CE. So he ruled for almost 40 years, and his rule is very well documented in all kinds of inscriptions and coins. And from these sources, we come to know that his rule ended in 688 CE. Kalhana's Raja Tarangini describes him as a virtuous king and a patron of arts and culture. So, Raja Tarangini by Kalhana is considered to be one of the first works of historiography in Indian subcontinent. There, this king Yashovarman has been written to be a very virtuous person, and he was a patron of arts, means he supported art and culture. Yashovarman consolidated Kanauj as a cultural and political center, bringing stability and prominence to the region. So, Yashovarman consolidated Kanauj means he brought up Kanauj as one of the important cultural center and also a political center. Now, expanding the Kanauj Empire. How did Yashovarman expand the empire of Kanauj? And the only way to expand empire is to get control over other regions. That is only possible through fights and wars. So, Yashovarman's conquest included campaigns into Malwa and Deccan. These two are areas in central India. Deccan is almost to the south, but it is in the central India. Malwa and Deccan. Malwa is in the western part of India, and Deccan is in the center portion of peninsular India, showcasing his ambition to dominate central India. So even though Kanauj is situated in present day Uttar Pradesh in North India, but still Yashovarman had an intention to dominate the central Indian political scenario. And so he launched campaigns and conquered the areas of Malwa and Deccan. He maintained strategic alliances with Nepal and Tibet, strengthening Kanauj's military position. So he had very good relationship with the king of Nepal and the king of Tibet. Tibet is an area above Nepal, north of Nepal. So all these places were in very good terms with Yashovarman. He This was a very diplomatic skill of Yashovarman. By establishing relationship with Nepal and Tibet, he secured his neighborhood. Means from the north, no attack will come. So it was a strategic alliance of Yashovarman. His battles against Chalukya king Vinayaditya in 696 to 674 CE, the Chalukya king was Vinayaditya, reflected his efforts to expand southward. So even though Vinayaditya became king in 696 CE. He played important role in the power dynamics of the Chalukyan dynasty. So before becoming king itself, he had major wars with Yashovarman, and thus from this wars we come to know that Yashovarman also intended to expand southward. Inscriptions from Gouda and Nalanda highlight his military success and administrative prowess. So, all these military campaigns have been listed in the Gouda and Nalanda inscriptions. By controlling vital trade routes, Yashovarman ensures Kanauj economic growth during his reign. So, by controlling all the commercial routes, routes through which business transaction was possible, all those routes were controlled by Yashovarman. Hence, he ensured that Kanauj prospered economically. Conflict with Lalitaditya. Now, who was Lalitaditya? Lalitaditya Muktapida of Kashmir launched a military campaign against Yashovarman, escalating tensions between two kingdoms. So, before we come to details about this military campaigns, Lalitaditya Muktapida was the king of Kashmir. He was one of the most important political figures of India at that point of time, and he was very powerful. It was under his supervision that Kalhan wrote Raja Tarangini. So, before becoming enemies with Yashovarman, Lalitaditya had very good relationship with Yashovarman. However, Yashovarman had a war with few of the princes of Turkey, and he took the areas of Jalandhar from the Turkic princes. Now, when the Turkic princes lost to Yashovarman, they intended to go to Lalitaditya in order to seek help. And Lalitaditya helped the Turkic princess and fought war with Yashovarman. This was all managed, all this policy was managed by Lalitaditya's minister Kankuna, led campaigns that seized territories including Punjab, Jalandhar, Kangra, and Poonch. So, all these territories were taken from Yashovarman by Lalitaditya. And who organized all these campaigns, who led all these campaigns? Kankuna or Kankuka, as mentioned in some sources. He was a man who had Turkish origins. However, because of some reason, he was in the court of Lalitaditya. So he helped his Turkic friends and conquered all these territories back from Yashovarman. And what are those territories? Punjab, Jalandhar, Kangra, and Poonch. Out of this, Jalandhar was the area because of which all the problems started. Diplomatic efforts to resolve disputes failed, resulting in renewed hostilities. Yashovarman was eventually defeated. So, Yashovarman at first tried to resolve everything diplomatically through talks, but this minister of Lalitaditya, Kankuka, was very expert in instigating wars. So his all the diplomatic efforts of Yashovarman failed, and eventually Yashovarman was defeated in war by the minister of Lalitaditya, Kankuka. Post defeat, Yashovarman became a feudatory under Lalitaditya as documented in Kalhana's Rajatarangini. So, after his defeat to Lalitaditya, Yashovarman became a ruler under Lalitaditya, and it has been documented in Kalhana's Rajatarangini. In Rajatarangini, Yashovarman has been held in high regard even though he was an enemy of Lalitaditya. Lalitaditya's campaign marked a turning point in Kanauj's history, reducing its dominance in northern India. So, after the defeat of Yashovarman by Lalitaditya, Kanauj lost a bit of its importance in the northern India's political scenario. Patron of arts and literature. So, how was Yashovarman as a cultural ruler? As we have already discussed, he was a patron of arts and literature. Yashovarman's reign is remembered for its cultural renaissance. His court attracted scholars, poets, and artists. So, Yashovarman's reign is famous for his support towards art and culture. And so his court had a lot of accomplished scholars, poets, and artists in it. And because of all these reasons, his efforts was also called as cultural renaissance, means rebirth of classical Indian culture. He commissioned literary works that glorified his rule and promoted Kanauj cultural significance. So, because of all these literary works, his rule was very much well documented and glorified, and thus Kanauj was seen as a cultural center of North India. The inscriptions and texts during his reign reflect advancements in art, architecture, and intellectual pursuits. So, all the inscriptions during the reign of Yashovarman reflect his support towards art, architecture, and intellectual pursuits. Kalhana's Rajatarangini highlights his patronage of arts and describes him as a king of great virtues. So here Kalhana was the court poet of Lalitaditya. However, even though Lalitaditya had a very conflicting relationship with Yashovarman, still Kalhana praised Yashovarman as a king of great virtues. This we can understand what was the impact of Yashovarman in the political scenario of northern India. Under Yashovarman, Kanauj became a hub for cultural exchanges and a center for learning in medieval India. So Kanauj became the center for cultural exchanges because it was in the trade route of the connection of India and Central Asia. It was in between that connection, and also many people wanted to conquer Kanauj. If not conquer, at least they wanted to come to Kanauj, and thus Kanauj became a center for cultural exchanges. Decline of Kanauj. What happened after the death of Yashovarman? Yashovarman's death led to a decline in Kanauj's political and cultural significance. So, after the death of Yashovarman, there was a decline in the politics and cultural importance of Kanauj. The conflict with Lalitaditya fragmented Kanauj's territorial control, weakening his hold over northern India. So all the areas like Kangra, Punch, Jalandhar, all these areas were under Kanauj. However, when the Lalitaditya defeated Yashovarman, all these areas went from Kanauj to the empire of Kashmir. Thus, there was a weakening hold of Kanauj over northern India. Successive rulers failed to maintain stability, and Kanauj became a target for regional powers. The rulers after Yashovarman were very weak and they could not stabilize the region. They were always drawn to allies, and so they went to fight for other kings, but their own territory of Kanauj remained neglected. And thus, Kanauj became a trophy for regional powers. Later on, we will see how the tripartite struggle arose, in which Kanauj was treated as a trophy by the Gurjara Patiharas, Rashtrakutas, and the Pala rulers of Bengal. So these three dynasties went on a race to capture Kanauj. This all happened because the original rulers of Kanauj were very weak. The Pratiharas, Palas, and Rashtrakutas fought over Kanauj during the tripartite struggle in the 8th century. So, all these three dynasties fought over Kanauj, and this fight is popularly called as tripartite struggle, and it happened during the 8th century. We will discuss about that later in one of our next videos. So Kanoj's decline marked the end of its prominence as a political and cultural center. After the death of Yashovarman, there was a temporary decline in Kanauj, and that with that there was an end of the prominence of the city of Kanauj in North Indian subcontinent. Now, Kanauj as an economic hub. How did this city function as a port of commerce? How did this city function as an important commercial center? Kanau's strategic location on major trade route contributed to its economic prosperity during Yashovarman's rule. So money is always brought in with the help of trade, and Kanauj was in northern India, very close to modern day Delhi, and it was in the western part of UP, Uttar Pradesh. So it is on the center of Gangetic plains, and so it itself is very prosperous because Gangetic plain is very fertile. However, Kanauj also was in the major trade route which connected India with Central Asia. Hence, there were a lot of merchant activity being done in Kanauj. Thus, Yashovarman led to its economic prosperity. Wang Wen's accounts describe Kanauj as a wealthy city with a thriving urban center. So Wang Wense was a Chinese person who at first came to Kanauj to defeat Arjun. And in his accounts, Kanauj has been described as a very prosperous and wealthy city. There was a thriving urban center. It was a thriving urban center, means city life was there within Kanauj. Control over trade routes facilitated economic growth and connected northern and central India. So, because of the control over trade routes, it not only became economically prosperous, it also acted as a connection between northern and central India. And that was the intention of Yashovarman because he conquered the areas of Malwa and Deccan in central India. The disruptions caused by Lalitaditya's campaigns adversely impacted Kanau's economic standing. So, because of Lalitaditya's attack on Yashovarman, there was a decline in the trading activities done in Kanauj, and so Kanauj lost its economic standing. Despite these setbacks, Kanauj remained a significant trading hub in Indian history. Even though there were many setbacks, and Kanauj is one of the cities in India which was most inflicted by consecutive wars, but still Kanauj remained as a significant trading hub. Now, impact of Kanauj. What role did Kanauj play in Indian history? Yashovarman's military campaigns expanded Kanauj's influence into neighboring regions like Gauda and Malwa. So, all these neighboring regions like Gauda and Malwa were brought under Yashovarman's rule, and thus there was a temporary Kanauj's empire, and thus Kanauj was very much influential in northern Indian politics. Diplomatic alliances was there with foreign powers like Nepal and Tibet, and that strengthened its regional ties. So Kanauj was governed with a very capably diplomatic ruler who made his neighbors his alliance, and thus there was a foreign relationship between Kanauj and other powers. Lalitaditya's campaigns disrupted Kanauj's influence, marking its decline in its dominance. So, after the attack by Lalitaditya, there was a disruption in the influence of Kanauj, and thus there was a decline in the dominance of Kanauj over northern India. Connaught's interactions with neighboring powers highlight its role as a mediator in regional politics. So Kanauj had very good relationship with all its neighboring powers, and thus in case of any conflict Kanauj acted as a mediator. So the rulers of Kanauj were very good diplomats. The city's decline paved way for other regional kingdoms to emerge as powerful entities. When declined, other regional kingdoms became powerful. Now, records of Kanauj's history. Where do we find the sources for knowing the history of Kanauj? Chinese pilgrim Wang Wense provides detailed accounts of Kanauj's political history and economic prosperity. So, Chinese pilgrim Wang Wense visited Kanauj and he was resented by Arjun. As a revenge, he killed all of Arjun's family and soldiers. So, thus, the Chinese pilgrim Wang Huanse knew a lot about Kanauj. And when he went back to China, he wrote in detail about the situation of India and focusing on the city of Kanauj. And thus, from his accounts, we come to know about the economic prosperity and political history of the urban center of Kanauj. Inscriptions in Prakrit document Yashovarman's military campaigns and governance. There are plenty of inscriptions in the region in Prakrit language, and from those inscriptions, we come to know about the military campaigns of Emperor Yashovarman. And as we know that Yashovarman was a ruler who was a patron of art and culture. So he sponsored different writers and poets to write about himself also. Kalhana's Rajatarangini praises Yashovarman's virtues and contributions to Kanod's cultural identity. So Yashovarman at first was a friend of Lalitaditya, and because of that probably Kalhana's Rajatarangini which was written under the supervision of Lalitaditya praises a lot about Yashovarman. So Yashovarman is told to be a ruler of many virtues. He is considered to be one person behind Kannauj's cultural identity in Kalhana's Rajatarangini. Coins from Yashovarman's reign reflect the city's wealth and stability under his rule. So, from the materialistic remains like the coins, we come to know that the monetary situation in Kanauj during the rule of Yashovarman was very much stable, and city had a considerable amount of wealth, which shows its economic prosperity. Later texts and records highlight Kanau's transition from a center of power to a contested territory. So later text, especially the inscriptions of Palas, Pratiharas, and Rashtrakutas, state that Kanauj was a bone of contention between different territorial dynasties. So that is a part which we will explore in our next videos. Now, legacy of Kanauj. Why is Kanauj important and what is its impact in Indian history? Kanauj symbolizes medieval northern Indian political and cultural dynamics. Yashovarman's rule marked the peak of Kanauj's influence in art, trade, and governance. Conflicts with Lalitaditya and others shaped its role in Indian history. The city's decline heralded new power struggles among the regional kingdoms like the Pratiharas and the Palas. Kanau's history provides insights into medieval Indian administration, diplomacy, and cultural achievements. So, thus, Kanauj is one of the most important cities in ancient Indian history and it has been discussed in very much detail. However, when we will read about the Gujjara Patiharas, Palas, and the Rashtrakutas, we will know much more in detail about what kind of military campaigns were fought in order to gain control over this prosperous city. So, for now, we will stop here, and thank you very much for watching my videos, because these videos are made by keeping in mind your studies, and it will be helpful to you if you are appearing for any kind of competitive exams. So with your support, I hope to bring brighter contents in future. Thank you so much for your love and support.